Hey, what up, Facebook? And what's going on with the Better Business Group people, all my business group associates? Thank you very much for joining me. It is Tuesday, 11 o'clock, and I have a very special guest with me today. I'll just bring him on. John, are you there?
Hi, everybody.
Hey, and John's out at his beautiful Sydney city office today. So thanks very much for joining us today, John.
No problem.
As everybody knows, my name's Glenn Kirkwood, aka ThatReferralGuy, and I help business owners generate referrals or new business through a referral system. Today, we've got a very special guest, John Boy, from JB Solicitors on. I'm going to introduce him in a sec, but I just wanted to ask you, do you have a property that you don't necessarily know all the rules or the laws? I mean, because today's topic really is around landlord-tenant agreements. So if you've got a question, just pop it in the chat bar, and then when John and I get finished with the interview, we will come back and answer all of those questions for you. So if you've got a property, commercial, John's going to be able to answer them live on this particular call. So let me introduce him. John, I've probably known for about 6 or 7 years now, but he's the prince. Yeah, it is. It's. I think the first time I ever met you was at Fairfield, so pretty close to your Canleyvale office.
Yeah.
But John is the principal of JB Solicitors, and they provide legal services to the local community. Now, that's a short intro, John, and some of the people would have got your bio through what I grabbed from your website. But how about you just tell a little bit of the listeners who you are and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, cool. So I grew up in the Fairfield local area. I was born at Prairiewood Hospital, went to a primary school there and 2 high schools there, worked in a suburban law firm there for about 7 years, and then I opened up JB Solicitors approximately 6 years ago. We service the local community in Fairfield, Liverpool, surrounding suburbs. We also have offices in the CBD as well. Mainly because the courts are around there, etc. So often we might have to head off to court, and makes a bit of sense. Been in business for 6 years, have a team of 7 lawyers, including myself, and loving every moment of it, Glenn.
That's good. I mean, did you always want to be a solicitor, John?
Yeah. I grew up. I've got 4 older sisters. I'm the youngest boy in the family. A lot of pressure by mum and dad, which I don't blame them for, which was great. Studied quite hard back in high school, and I think I was always kind of drawn to the law. Mum and dad wanted me to be a doctor, but for whatever reason, law was where I wanted to go. I think law is, can be a very stressful job, no doubt about that. But I think it's quite an amazing job in the sense that often people call you when they're in quite difficult situations or quite stressed out, or are looking for your advice and guidance. And I think that it's a great thing that people actually turn to me and say, "Hey, John, can you help me out with this scenario or this situation?" And it's very rewarding and fulfilling to be able to be that guidance to people in the local community. So yeah, I mean, I love the job. I think I'm quite fortunate in that sense, that I found a career which I'm quite passionate about, which I believe in. So yeah, I suppose I did always kind of wanted to be a lawyer, kind of fell into it, but led myself on that path at the same time.
There's a couple of things you just mentioned in that, John. Were your parents, did they migrate to Australia?
Yes, they did. They migrated at the end of the Vietnam War. Yeah.
Okay. So, what was the pressure as a only son? That your parents migrated here, and then the pressure on you in getting a good career. All right. As you were growing up through your educational years at primary school, high school, was it always study? This is what we need you to be.
Yeah. I suppose there was, you did feel as though that there was an expectation, but at the same time, your parents, want the best for you, right? Mm. And it wasn't, obviously, they were strict and they said, you should study, but even when it came time to exam times, that you could tell that they would back off quite a bit and be like, you do you, don't stress out too much. But growing up and listening to, say, my mum and dad's story, which a lot of people in the local community would have the same story, so I'm not unique in that sense. But hearing about the struggles, of war, and then leaving everything behind and coming to Australia for a better life, understanding the opportunity that we have in this wonderful country that we live in, and you feel an obligation to do the best that you can to give back to your parents that have given so much to you. So yes, I mean, I'm not going to say that it was just all pressure from them. I'm going to say that pressure was probably inbuilt in yourself just because of the circumstances that surround. But yeah, growing up, it was study, and it was, obviously a lot of family time. Mum and dad worked really hard, and they still work really hard. So yeah.
Well, you mentioned family there, and a lot of what I see is just how family orientated you are. There's always images of you, some type of food or celebration, and it's always family in most of your social media. So tell us a little bit about, what are the things that you enjoy? I mean, I know you like to exercise and traveling, but it mostly came down to spending time with family. Why is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose I've always been quite a family-orientated guy. As I said, I've got 4 sisters. There's 9 little nephews and nieces now, which make it all fun. So Christmas and dinner times is quite enjoyable. It's just a good support network. My family support me. I support them. There's a strong, loving relationship. We give to each other as much as we can. I don't want to be all up on my high horse, but I think it's just a great environment. I can't complain about the amount of support. They've always believed in me, taught me. I've made mistakes growing up. I'm the youngest out of the sisters. I've probably done the wrong thing to mum and dad here and there, and they've always forgiven me and loved me for it. So
do you think,
yeah.
I mean, when I first met you, it was the category of family law, how I've known you. I mean, I know we're going to talk about tenant law today, but do you think that you having such great families around you, support and all that sort of thing, makes you a better family solicitor?
Glenn, I haven't thought about it that way since you've said it, but I suppose one of the things I love about family law, and so many people, when I say to them I do a lot of family law work, they say, how do you do that? It's so stressful. There's so much arguing between 2 parties. But when you're a family lawyer, your clients really turn to you for a lot of support. How are their finances going to look following separation? Where are they going to live? How are they going to pay their mortgage? How are they going to put food on the table or send their kids to school? And you're organizing 2 separate households. Before it was 1 household, and now you're organizing 2 separate ones, and you're guided to assist these parties. It's not just about the separation at that time, but it's structuring the next 5, 10, 20 years of their life, whether that be finances or whether that be the care of children. So in drawing that back, I suppose you are providing a lot of support to people in this moment. And if I take that back to, say, the support that I had from my family, they provided a lot of support to me growing up. They still do now, which might be, as you've pointed out, you connected those 2 things for me, might be the reason why I quite enjoy providing that support to other people as well.
Do you know, I used to do some coaching exercises, and they've proven studies that if people had to do a particular task, they get to a particular, let's just say 80%. And then when they have people yelling and screaming and saying, you can do it, just how much further they can reach and achieve from themselves just by having that support. So support's very, very important, both in family law, and obviously in a lot of what we're going to talk about today, tenant law. You've got to have that good sort of infrastructure around you to run a better business, really. Listen, let me just fire a couple of quick questions at you. Who are the clients that you really serve?
I serve the local community, as I've said. So individuals and small to medium enterprises.
Because you're a whole, you cover many areas of law in your practice.
Yeah, we are primarily a generalist law firm where the solicitors are split up in two. So we're split up in transactional work, which is your leases, your purchases of businesses, your buying, selling houses, and then your commercial agreements, subcontract agreements, shareholders agreements, joint venture agreements, things like that. And then the other side of the practice is dispute resolution. So your family law disputes, your contested estates, so disputed estates, and your commercial disputes as well.
People can be funny. Tell me, what is your biggest challenge in business to date?
My biggest challenge in business to date would be, well, I suppose there's a few challenges. The biggest challenge would be just making sure that I keep a balance of everything in my life. And I think we all struggle from that. It can be quite easy to get very focused on one element of your business, or very focused on just working many hours. But life, in order to perform well, I think that we have to have a balanced life, and that would be your interaction with your family, interaction with your friends, making sure you're eating well and keeping your health up to date. Look, I suppose, Glenn, none of this is new stuff. It's probably stuff we all know. But I believe it so much that if you can make sure you live a balanced life, you can perform at your highest at every single point in your life, right? Or point in your day, or point in your week. And the thing about balance is that it's actually not a destination. It's something that you continually have to strive for on a day-to-day basis. So, and really, it is day-to-day. So I might have lived quite well balanced in the last couple of days, but that might dip in the next couple of days. And it's really making sure that I keep that in check. I take the time, I take the step back, and I think to myself, right, how do I be in tune internally what's going on inside of me, so that I can make sure that I'm being as balanced as possible in order to perform at the highest level that I can.
Sometimes I just have to get a control of my emotions, because sometimes I know that when I make emotional decisions, they're not usually good ones. I need to think about them. But if I ever lose control of my emotions, that's when I struggle with my business. Okay, so that's been the biggest challenge. Okay, so what are you doing right now to actually grow JB Solicitors?
I think for us, one of the most important things is culture, and ensuring that we foster a really strong culture where our core values are prominent. We all know what we believe in, what we stand for, that we're clear, and there's alignment in the business with our mission statement and our brand promises. And I think that once the culture of the practice is there, that can seep through in absolutely everything we do, from picking up the telephone to writing a letter to communicating with clients to the service and value and quality that we provide. So, for me to grow my business, to grow all the facets of the business, and that's not just revenue count or head count, it extends to quality, to value. To me, if we could just continually press with a strong culture in the practice, then I think that's the way to grow.
I think when I coach clients, sometimes it's very easy to get bogged down in the details, and every once in a while, and I get that might be the pressing issue. I call it, that's what we're focusing on, the little a, but how does that serve our big A, our big agenda? What is it we're really overall trying to do? And when I get people to be thinking, well, hang on a tick, how does this actually really serve them? They go into a different sort of mindset and going, oh, okay, I've got to come back to, as you said, brand promise. You've got to come back to what is it, our core offering? What are we trying to achieve for our particular clients? That's great. Okay, so I want to dive down more into, as you said, landlord-tenant agreements. Now, I've got, you've sent through some slide deck here. Let me just bring that to the screen. Here we are. So tell us a little bit about this particular presentation before you go into it.
Sure. Okay, so obviously, in the current climate that we have, this has been quite a topic that has come to the forefront between commercial tenants and landlords. A lot of businesses have been affected because of the government restrictions and government policies. No fault of the government, of course. It's because of this pandemic that we have. So we've been getting a lot of calls, both on the commercial landlord side and both on the tenant side. So this slideshow is to attempt to educate both commercial landlords and tenants as to what the current government regulations are. And it's also my hope to remind commercial landlords that they have interests, but so do their tenants, and vice versa. The tenants need to understand that this is the shoes I'm put in, but we also have to put ourselves in the shoes of the landlord as well. We can't just always think about ourselves. And I've always seen it this way, particularly because I work in disputes and in commercial transactions, that the relationship between a commercial landlord and a commercial tenant is a business partnership, right, Glenn? But the tenant wants the commercial landlord to succeed and to be profitable and to have a commercial premise that is tenanted and rent is paying well. The landlord wants the tenant to succeed as well. No landlord wants their tenant to fail. So they've entered into this partnership where the landlord and the tenant has said to the landlord, hey, look, I'm going to borrow your premise for a little bit. I'm going to hope to generate a very prosperous business. In return, I'm going to pay you a rent for that. The landlord has said the same thing to the tenant. Borrow my premise for a little bit. I hope that your business does well, and let's both make some good money and provide a service and add value to the community.
Correct.
With everything that's happened, I feel like that relationship has been stressed because the communication between the landlord and tenant has changed dramatically. And so the government has come in and put in some regulations to try to help both of these parties to come to some good resolutions.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll flick through the slides. Here we go. So these are all the services that you offer, really, isn't it?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Yep, cool.
There's a quick introduction to the team. You can see good-looking John in the middle there, and as you said, you're a team of 7. Yep. Okay. And then I'll bring up John's details at the end. I'll put them in the chat after. But if you want to get in contact with John, he's very, very accessible, which I love that about him. Sometimes I find that principals in a legal firm aren't accessible, and you have to go through juniors or PAs. But John's very accessible. Okay. As with all advice, this is John's disclaimer. So please have a read of that. We're going to give a general sort of version of agreements. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just touch on that a little bit, Glenn, as well. Okay. We're talking about leases, and particularly in commercial leases, every lease has been prepared unique to the situation of the landlord and tenant. So the advice that I'm giving today is very general advice, and obviously should not be used without consultation with a solicitor or without review of your lease, because every lease is different. It's a commercial lease. No two leases are the same. They all have different things that we negotiate. So yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Next slide.
Yeah. So this is the this is the National Cabinet Code, and this is the legislation that was introduced basically to help regulate the relationship between landlords and tenants during this period. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. You just nod your head when you want me to go to the next slide.
Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. So with leases, as I said, all leases are different. So it's important that you understand the terms of your lease and to understand the obligations. Leases can be quite difficult documents to read. They can be quite thick documents, which is why it's quite important to perhaps get a solicitor to explain those terms to you. And so now we're moving into our, Glenn, if you can go to the next slide, we're moving into a situation where coronavirus has created the terms of the lease to be altered. So what are usually the terms of the lease? Payment of rent, payment of insurance. An important one is not to abandon premises. So when you actually take out a lease, you're often, and as I said, often because every lease is different, often you have promised the landlord, hey, I'm going to keep this shop open, or I'm going to continue to rent this office, and I won't abandon the premise. There's already a lot of terms in leases where you must notify landlords of any infectious diseases that in that premise as well. So again, that's quite an important obligation, particularly with this COVID-19 issue going on. And to follow health and safety procedures set out in the lease and comply requirements regarding infectious diseases and reporting those infectious diseases as well. So that's just some of the terms. Are you a tenant wanting to close business as a precaution? Landlords may not apply any provision on levy and any penalties during this period. So what's happened is the government's introduced the National Code of Conduct, which started in New South Wales. If you're in a different state, then it's all a little bit different. But it started around in about mid-April and is supposed to go for about 6 months to October. There's been some talks about the extension of the JobKeeper allowance and JobKeeper and JobSeeker. And so it might be quite likely that the National Code of Conduct in relation to commercial leases and retail leases is probably going to be extended as well. So look out in the news over the next couple of days or weeks for a bit more information on that. The information comes out so quickly, so I'm not sure if it's out there yet already, but from my checking of this morning, it doesn't seem as though it is. But for present purposes, my understanding is that October is when this code gets repealed, right? So Glenn, if you can go to the next slide. If you're a tenant that is voluntarily staying opened, then you still have the right to rely upon the Code of Conduct, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail soon. So Glenn, if we can just go to the next slide as well. Yeah. So what I'm going to go through is some of the things that the code actually talks about, right? Now, if you're a tenant and you don't have an ability to pay rent during this 6-month period, then landlords are not allowed to draw on your security for the payment of that rent, whether that's the bank guarantee, the personal guarantee, or the cash deposit. Landlords, for present purposes, are not allowed to draw on that. Glenn, next slide. If, contrary to the previous scenario where the tenant has agreed to keep the premise opened, this is a situation where, say, landlords are wanting to close the building due to COVID-19. A lot of questions we get asked is, what does that mean for the tenant? Does the tenant have to pay the rent, or can the tenant say to the landlord, you've decided to close because of COVID-19, we are unable to utilize the premise, and therefore we're unable to pay the rent, right? Generally, in the case where the landlord itself decides to close the building, there is a pretty strong claim that the tenant can say to the landlord, you have breached my right of quiet enjoyment of the premise. That's the legal terms that we use, and therefore I'm unable to pay that rent and continue to operate my business. Okay.
So would that be an example? Would be, say, the building you're in. If the owners of that particular building sort of said, hey, we don't want to take the risk of people using common areas. We want everybody to vacate the whole building. Therefore, they are restricting you from actual trade using that particular, your city office. And therefore, there's legitimate that you could actually have a claim over there.
Yeah, that's right. I think that would be a pretty good case for you to say, look, if I can't use the property, then
how am I going to pay for it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing that tenants might want to do in this time is, coronavirus could affect the business to such an extent that the tenant decides, look, this isn't going to work out for me. My cash flow is being affected, and I don't think I'm going to recover, even with JobKeeper, JobSeeker, and any of the reductions that the National Code of Conduct allows us to have. I want to terminate the lease. Now, obviously, each scenario will turn on itself, but there are a couple of ways to terminate the lease. One is called force majeure, the other is repudiation, and the other is frustration. Right. So force majeure is something that actually needs to be held in the actual lease agreement. So it's very important that you read the lease agreement and read the wording of the lease agreement. And in the lease agreement, it might also talk about outbreaks, infectious outbreaks, and whether what would happen during that period of an infectious outbreak, and whether the tenant has the right to the termination of the lease, or whether the landlord has the right to force the tenant to continue to remain in the lease agreement because of the force majeure event. So that might be a way out when you look at the lease and see what the terms are. For the landlord, that might be a way to ensure the tenant doesn't break the lease and cause you significant loss through non-payment of rent. Repudiation is another legal term, and it's another way that a tenant could terminate the lease. And that's if either the landlord or the tenant is unable or unwilling to perform the lease or any obligations because of COVID-19. So again, back into the previous scenario, if the landlord said, "Hey, I'm shutting the whole business down. The whole building down. I don't want the common areas. The common areas is I'm concerned about a breakout in the common areas." The tenant might be able to say in a situation like that, "Hey, look, you can't comply with your obligations pursuant to the lease because of the COVID-19 situation, and because of that, I want to terminate." Yeah. Frustration is the third way. So there's no other ways. These are the only three ways that you can do it. And that's if the lease is impossible to perform because of COVID-19. So it may be possible for the tenant to argue that the lease has been frustrated and should be brought to an end. It's very, very similar to repudiation, but it's a little bit different because repudiation is where the tenant is unable or unwilling, whereas frustration is where it's just impossible to occur because of a government restriction or because of an external factor.
Yeah. So, John, there were some industries that got affected more than others, and I have no doubt that the people will be used to sort of saying infectious diseases in future lease agreements. But is it your experience that those types of conditions were already in existing leases?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
So, yes, force majeure events have already been considered in the past, and they're already part of quite standard. They're quite a standard term in the lease agreement. So, you'd be interested to find that it actually would talk about infectious diseases. It'd talk about war. It would also talk about natural disasters as well.
Okay.
So natural disasters and war seem to be more prevalent in these leases. However, there are many leases out there that do talk about infectious diseases.
I guess that is a good reason for, if you were to skim over your own lease and sort of going, "Oh, hey, what does that really mean? That's not really going to happen." That's exactly why you should have a solicitor point out and explain to you what each of these different sections of the lease mean.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about landlords.
Yeah. So, all right. Landlords, again, review the lease, but the obligations are that we will need to comply with the directions of the relevant authorities. As you would know, Glenn, the rules and the legislations are changing quite quickly. And interpretation of those rules and regulations, it needs to be ironed out over time as well. So it is obviously very hard for landlords and for tenants to understand what the relevant authorities are saying. However, there is an obligation to comply with those directions. So, particularly with the extension of JobKeeper and JobSeeker, we should see that this National Code of Conduct will be affected as well. And once we hear what the relevant authorities have to say about that, then we all ought to comply, no doubt. Landlords go back. Yep, sorry.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah. So one of the things that has been spoken about a lot is that landlords are required to engage, and so are tenants are required to engage in good faith negotiations with tenants. They're obligated to work with the tenants and external parties who are in the premises to have open communication on suspected or confirmed cases and take steps to prevent the spread. So that's an obligation by the landlord, and it's an obligation by the tenant. Also, during this period, landlords must not take any action against a tenant for failure to pay rent. This is the big topic at the present moment. Or outgoings. So outgoings being water rates, strata rates, council rates, rubbish removal, or business not being open during specified hours. As I said previously, there's usually an obligation in leases for landlord and tenant, for the tenant not to vacate or abandon the premise. So often landlords say you have to be open from 8:30 to 5 o'clock. At the present moment, landlords cannot take action against tenants for their failure to not have the business opened during hours. And the actions that they're not allowed to take is eviction, exercising right of re-entry to premises, termination of leases, interest or fee on unpaid rent. So we can't say, you need to pay me the cash rate for interest on the unpayment of rent, can't take position, and can't seek any other damages that the landlord might ordinarily seek. Yeah, cool. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess I had a question like, in regards to that rent, will landlords in the future look to try and recoup some of their missed rent, or is everybody just going to share the losses?
Yeah, so again, what we talk about in the National Code is getting everybody to the table and having discussions that works best for the landlord and for the tenant. There are some rules in place. So the rules in place are that the rent should be reduced by the amount of reduction in revenue of the tenant, up to a minimum of 50%. Okay, so if your revenue has reduced by, say, 50%, then there should be a reduction or a waiver in the rent by 50%. And then if, say, your revenue is reduced by 100%, then there should be a reduction in your rent by 50%. And the remaining 50% can be abated, which means can be paid over, and what the National Code has said, paid over a long period of time, right? Okay. But the starting point is to have those negotiations and to have those conversations, for the tenant to provide information to the landlord so that the landlord can understand that the position the tenant is in, and also for the landlord to provide information to the tenant so that the tenant can understand the position the landlord is in. Because tenants have to pay rent, but landlords have to pay mortgages. So it's not just a one-way street, it's a two-way street.
Correct.
And if the landlord can't afford to maintain the lease because of the mortgage obligations that the landlord has, then the agreement that's entered into between the landlord and the tenant has to take that into consideration. The banks have been quite good during this period as well, and they've also allowed for suspension on payment of mortgage repayments in commercial tenancy, in commercial loan agreements. And so that is assisting, at the end of the day, it's really assisting landlords in their negotiations with the tenant, so that more can be offered to each other during this very unprecedented period where a lot of businesses have totally lost their income streams. Yeah.
So, John, have you seen an increase in inquiries in regards to people understanding or not understanding their lease agreements, and what should they do moving forward?
Yeah, we've been talking pretty much non-stop to real estate agents, commercial real estate agents, to landlords, to tenants, who are all asking what's going on, what are the current rules, and are all stressed in their own right. And it's really about facilitating those conversations as best as we can, and reminding landlords and tenants that, hey, we're in this together, reminding tenants that, hey, it's not just your business that's been affected, but the landlord's business has also been affected. And reminding landlords that, look, the tenants are going through a really tough time. It's not that we're trying to do this to each other, but it's the current climate that we're in. And if we work together, then there has to be a way where we can try to resolve the issues for the benefit of both parties, so that the landlord doesn't have to sell their commercial property or default on their mortgage, and the tenant can hopefully come out of this whole situation and still be able to operate and run a successful business.
Yeah, correct. It's not sort of like an us versus them sort of mentality. It's more like, well, none of us were planning on this happening, but how can we get through it, as they quote on TV, all get through this together, and having a different look at the way that their leases are by working through that situation together.
Yeah, that's right.
Your landlord has a business to run, right? Mortgage, as you said, but so does the tenant, and both want to come out of COVID-19 moving forward.
Yeah, that's right.
I just found myself just quoting all the typical things that Polly's just quote all the time. Sort of going, there's no other way around it to just sort of saying, really, you do need to work together. If you're on either side of the fence, you need to work with your partner for your business to be prosperous. So I remembered an interview you did a few weeks back with Ronald.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, if you weren't aware of it before, you do need to surround yourself with people that you trust around certain industries. So you need someone to look after your estate planning. You need someone to look after your finances, and you definitely need a good accountant and a good solicitor. All right. So if you don't have those types of people around you, when these types of situations come up, you're going to struggle. Now, the key part to doing this is one of the reasons why I put on this Facebook group is because I wanted you to be able to surround yourself with good business professionals. All right. And so whether or not you like solicitors or accountants or finance brokers or not, you must have them in your world. It depends on whether or not you have access to them. All right. I don't know what most people are like, but I don't seem to have a problem reaching out and just having a quick little chat with the people in my space to help my business run better. And if you're running a business, I urge you to have a great relationship with a solicitor. If not, reach out to the number that's on your screen now, or even the website, and reach out to John. He's always up for a quick little chat or a coffee, or can point you in the direction of one of his team. He's got a big team there. There's a YouTube link that you put up there, John. That's I guess who's that by?
That's by us, yeah. So we put out a fair bit of content. I'm a strong believer that our job is to educate the community as best as we can. And so obviously give me a call. If you actually go on my website, my mobile number is actually listed there as well. And I feel like I'm pretty good. So if you give me a buzz, I can usually point you in the right direction, or call you back within the day to give you any advice. If it's urgent, obviously send me a text message and I'll try to get back to you straight away. But jump on our YouTube channel as well. We post a video once a week on the YouTube channel about different topics, particularly relating to business, your estate planning stuff, your family law issues, And it's always good to get that information to learn more. Perhaps maybe after you call me, you think, oh, I wouldn't mind knowing a little bit more about that. Well, jump on YouTube. Videos work really, really well to give that educational piece. Or perhaps you want to go on the YouTube first and find out a little bit more before you give me a buzz to ask me a few more questions.
Mm-hmm.
We also produce a lot of content as well. So as in written content. So once a week we send out I know it's a lot of words, but 2,000 word blog posts. But we try to have it very detailed in there. So, the headings are there, skim through if it's too much. But if you really want to get into a lot of detail about some of the different topics that our law firm can assist you with, and jump on that as well. And we also have a monthly newsletter. The monthly newsletter just combines all of those things, our videos, our webinars, and our content written pieces as well.
Well, that's great, John. I mean, so as you said, it's education, comes down to education. So what would be a good referral for you? Who would be someone that, look, I'll bring up one of the questions that really was here. And this actually comes from a real estate friend of mine in Queensland, a lady called Shelley. And so she's, as a result of this particular show, hey, thanks very much for introducing me to John. But who else besides solicitors, besides real estate agents, would be a good referral for you?
For me, I like to meet a lot of financial planners, mortgage brokers, accountants, of course, business owners that operate in small to medium businesses. I think that I can provide a lot of value for them, and obviously they can provide a lot of value to me as well. So yeah, look, to be honest, Glenn, I'm usually up for a chat. So.
I think you've just been reading my client list. They're all the same sort of clients that I deal with, which I guess is a reason for having you on the show. Everybody, John and I met a couple of weeks ago, just have a bit of a catch up and a coffee, and it was through there that I just sort of said, you know what, you'd be a great person to have on the show because of his attitude, right? Now, everybody knows that the reason I put the Better Business Place community together is to help business owners get in touch with really good quality professionals. I don't bring guests onto the show that I don't previously know or believe that they can add some value. And every experience that I've had with John, he's always been a giver and very open. So thanks very much for being on the show, John. We've got your details there. I will put in links all underneath. And if you are a mortgage broker, you are a financial planner, or you are a real estate agent, and you want to have a chat, then do yourself a favour, get onto the website or give John a quick call. Is there anything else that you wanted to say in passing comments, John?
No, just thank you. I hope I didn't bore everybody with all those details. I hope I added some value there. If anything doesn't make sense, give me a buzz. Happy to have a chat.
You know what, folks? It is a fairly dry topic. But of course, there are some people, as a result of what we've brought up today, that would be going through those exact situations. So where are they going to get that sort of information? So whilst it might seem dry, it actually does have real impact on people if they're not getting this type of thing right, and they need to turn to someone who can help them navigate their way through this. John's an excellent person to do that with. So until next week, until next Tuesday at 11 a.m., I'll say good night. My name is Glenn Kirkwood, aka That Referral Guy, signing off with a reminder to make, build, and share connections. And I'll see you next Tuesday.
See you, everyone.
Okay, we are